playing with somebody as unique as Randy, somebody who starts a whole school of guitar playing, of how to do it, you know, how it's done. They are irreplaceable, not only as humans, but as artists.
For the short time that he had on this earth, he said so much. And you know what? He looked cool and he rocked out.
I very clearly remember growing my hair out, you know, in the early 80s and going to the hairdresser with a picture of Randy Rhoads and going like, I want that, like give me that. And that was like the Guitar Hero era, so there was a lot of people, but he was the biggest one for me. When I was a kid, the first overdrive I ever got was a Distortion Plus. And my first real guitar was a Les Paul.
So I started playing guitar in the early 80s. So this is prime Randy Rhoads time, right? And I was always into gear and stuff, so fascinated by the guitars, and I knew he was using, you know, a Duncan Distortion in the bridge, and I knew he was using a MXR Distortion Plus, and you know, the Marshalls. I wanted to know everything. Altec speakers. I knew all this stuff when I was 12. I was like obsessed.
So I actually got to play with Randy in both, you know, the Randy Rhoads from Quiet Riot, local guitar hero in Los Angeles, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Famer as guitar player for Ozzy Osbourne. And what was really interesting with Randy was the fact that he had a sound in his head, an oral vision of what his sound was supposed to be like. Because when we were in Quiet Riot, Randy was playing through a PV head and an Ampeg cabinet with 6 12 JBL speakers. And he didn't have it in his budget to go out and buy a Marshall stacks at that time. You know, he didn't have an endorsement, he had nothing. He was this guy in LA playing in a local band. But in order for him to get the sound in his head, it was using the MXR Distortion, you know, which is very similar to what we were doing every time that Quiet Riot with Randy would go in the studio. He used to bring in Fender Champ amplifier. You know, just get the most out of the amplifier and then use the pedals. You know, even though he might have been playing through a small rig or the massive backline that he used during the Diary of a Madman tour. He had 5 Marshall stacks. But then again, it was a conduit, a tool to express himself. And it was here, and it was in his hand, it was in his heart, and then it just went through the electronics, and it came out.
Being such a fan and follower of Randy and his legacy, it was my first concert in 1981 this is the first guy I ever saw. He's my first guitar hero. You know, you hear the Crazy Train riff on the radio and you say, wow, what is that sound and who is this guy? And I wanted to find out how he was doing that. So that drew me to, you know, the pedals that he was using and the programs you read. This is the gear that he used. So seeing the family get together with Dunlop just seemed like the perfect match to find the best way to honor Randy's gear legacy. The family granted the Dunlop crew access to Randy's original pedalboard. The board revealed a unique setup. The Crybaby was set first in the chain. The rocker pedal was disengaged and the potentiometer was in a fixed position. The chain ran through an MXR 10-band EQ, a Distortion Plus, then through a chorus, and an MXR flanger. All the pedals were mounted upside down inside the board and modified for the relay switching. And at the end of the chain, there was a Roland volume pedal. The Dunlop team then analyzed the Distortion Plus to gather all the information they could. To faithfully recreate Randy's tone, Dunlop engineers used era authentic components, a ceramic disc capacitor, 1 N270 germanium diodes, a 741 op amp, and a custom circuit layout. Visually, the pedal pays tribute to Randy's iconic Concord guitar. You know, there are so many musicians that were waiting for this to happen and that are stoked for this to happen, so it's neat to see it come full circle.
He is the musician with the most musical integrity I've ever played with. You know, as far as that dedication to music. If it was in a room, there would be a guitar with him. Even on the bus, there would be a guitar with him. Backstage, he always had a guitar in his hands.
He's an interesting character in guitar playing because people remain obsessed with him. He's a huge influence, but there is nobody, to my ear, that really sounds like him. Randy Rhoads, to me, had dirt in his playing. And you don't hear a lot of dirt. Everybody's afraid of the dirt now. Everybody smooths that off their recording. And that dude had style and flair and some nastiness, and it wasn't all perfect. You even hear on like Tribute, sometimes he goes off the rails, and it's great.
I mean, we got to keep in mind that at the time, there was nothing that sounded like those first Ozzy solo records. He was doing things that nobody had heard before and writing things that nobody had heard before. It's like, I don't know, just popped in my head. And then when he does the crazy stuff towards the end and that crazy sound, the climb at the end, it was like how is he even doing that?
When Diary of a Madman came out and I heard Over the Mountain, it was only a matter of seconds before I picked up a guitar and started learning it. And then Flying High Again was another one. That solo in Flying High Again is so important to what he did. But man, I guess when I learned Over the Mountain, it was just mind-blowing to me. It was like, how's he doing all this stuff? And how's he doing that? Every time I hear it, I'm like, I have to stop. Everybody shut up! I gotta stop what I'm doing and just, take a moment and absorb it again, because it was so incredible and so important to how I developed as a guitar player.
I always go back to Mr. Crowley. That's the most, unhinged and kind of emotional guitar solo.
Yeah, he was one of a kind. I mean, yeah, like a unicorn. I mean, this story that Ozzy tells about how he was just warming up through a little practice amp, like tuning, and he already knew he was the right guy to be his guitar player.
He just had this thing that was all him. And I think when you do that, you can't not just make an impact to so many guitar players, which he did. And there you go, superhuman.
1981, after the Blizzard of Oz Ozzy band, they replaced the rhythm section. So Tommy Aldrich was already in the band when they asked me to come in and audition. And thanks to Randy, who recommended me, because I was just a guy sleeping on Kevin DuBro's spare bedroom floor. And the only thing I had on my resume was that I used to play with Randy Rhoads in Quiet Riot. That was it. So, he put his reputation on the line with Sharon and Ozzy and recommended me, and I got the gig, and I started playing with Ozzy, and that changed my life. People ask me, why am I still doing this? For many reasons. I'm back with Quiet Riot, my home. Since 1978 when I first joined the band. And when I go on stage, I bring Randy with me.